Welcome to Nocturnal Ledger. There are places in this world where history does not merely pass, it stains. It seeps into the limestone, saturates the floorboards, and lingers in the air like a heavy, suffocating fog long after the events themselves have concluded. We often look to ancient castles or fog-swept moors for these stories. But true terror often resides in the tropics, where the heat accelerates decay and the humidity preserves the scent of death. Tonight, we turn our gaze toward Indonesia, to the city of Semarang in central Java. Here, standing like a white colossus against the chaotic modern skyline, is a building that defies the passage of time. It is an architectural marvel of the Dutch colonial era, a labyrinth of 1,000 doors, and a stone witness to atrocities so severe that the boundary between the living and the dead has been irrevocably shattered. This is the story of Lawang Sewu. To understand the hauntings of Lawang Sewu, we must first peel back the layers of its deception. When you approach the building today, you are met with grand, sweeping arches and pristine white walls that gleam under the sun. It looks like a palace, a testament to European engineering and colonial wealth. But the locals know better. They know that a fresh coat of paint cannot mask what lies beneath. They know that this building, constructed in 1904, was never meant to be a house of horrors. Yet it became one of the most terrifying locations on the planet. This is not folklore born of superstition. This is a haunting born of documented, verified, historical brutality. Let us go back to the beginning. The year is 1904. The Dutch East Indies Railway Company, an entity of immense power and bureaucratic reach, required a headquarters befitting its status. They commissioned a masterpiece. The architects designed a complex that utilized the Indies Empire style, blending European aesthetics with tropical practicality. The most striking feature, and the one that would give the building its legendary name, was the sheer number of openings. To combat the oppressive Javanese heat without modern air conditioning, the architects installed hundreds of tall, wide doors and windows to facilitate cross-ventilation. While the official count of doors is not exactly 1,000, the visual effect of these endless, gaping rectangles created the moniker Lawang Sewu, which translates from Javanese as the 1,000 doors. For nearly 40 years, the only sounds echoing through these cavernous hallways were the clicking of typewriters, the shuffling of administrative papers, and the footsteps of Dutch officials managing the railway logistics of a colony. It was a place of order, a place of commerce. But structures, like people, have destinies they cannot foresee. The turning point came in 1942, with the arrival of the Second World War in the Pacific. When the Japanese Imperial Army invaded Indonesia, the administrative order of Lawang Sewu was dismantled overnight. The Japanese forces seized the complex, seeing strategic value in its robust construction and its central location. The typewriters were thrown out. The railway schedules were burned. The era of the 1,000 doors as a place of business ended, and its era as a slaughterhouse began. The Japanese Kempeitai, the dreaded military police known for their ruthlessness, requisitioned the building. They did not use the grand offices for administration. They used the basement for interrogation. This serves as the geographical heart of the horror. The basement of Lawang Sewu was originally designed as a cooling system. It was a vast, subterranean network of tunnels and reservoirs that could be flooded to keep the floors above cool during the scorching dry season. The Kempeitai looked at this engineering marvel and saw a dungeon. They repurposed these cooling tunnels into squat prisons. These were box-like concrete cells, incredibly cramped, often filled with water that rose to the prisoners' waists or necks. Documented testimonies from survivors and historical records from the post-war independence struggle detail the conditions. Prisoners were forced to crouch in these water-filled stone boxes, covered by metal grates, often for days on end without food, light, or sleep. The water was not clean. It quickly became a slurry of filth, blood, and waste. The psychological terror of being submerged in darkness listening to the screams of others echoing through the ventilation shafts. The very shafts designed to bring fresh air to the Dutch administrators created an atmosphere of absolute dread. But the basement was not merely a prison. It was an execution chamber. Historical records from the Battle of 5 Days in Semarang, a pivotal conflict in October 1945 between Indonesian independence fighters and Japanese troops, confirmed that Lawang Sewu was a focal point of the violence. It was here that dozens, perhaps hundreds, of Indonesian nationalists were detained. When the order for execution came, it was swift and brutal. Many of the executions at Lawang Sewu were carried out by beheading. The Japanese officers, adhering to a twisted code of martial honor, used katanas. The bodies were often dumped into the small river beside the building or left in the basement tunnels. This is not a ghost story. This is a historical fact. The blood of young men fighting for their nation's freedom, soaked into the concrete of the basement floor. The sheer volume of trauma unleashed in this location over the span of 3 years is difficult to comprehend. It is what parapsychologists often refer to as a residual haunting of the highest order, where the emotional energy is so intense it imprints upon the environment, like a recording on magnetic tape. However, the phenomena reported at Lawang Sewu go far beyond residual echoes. Witnesses do not just hear the sounds of the past. They interact with intelligent, malevolent entities that seem to guard the building to this day. Since the war ended, and the building fell into a long period of neglect before its recent restoration, the reports of supernatural activity have been consistent, specific, and terrifying. They come from night watchmen, tourists, military personnel, and television crews. The consistency of these reports is what makes them so compelling to investigators. One of the most frequently cited apparitions is that of the Dutch woman. While the basement belongs to the war, the upper floors seem to hold a different kind of tragedy. Legend says she was a woman of high standing, perhaps the wife or daughter of a railway official, who committed suicide within the building to avoid capture by the invading Japanese forces. Others suggest she was a victim of a crime of passion long before the war. Witnesses describe her as a pale figure, dressed in period-appropriate colonial attire, often seen gliding silently along the third-floor corridors. Unlike the violent energy of the basement, the Dutch woman is often accompanied by an overwhelming sense of melancholy. Those who encounter her report a sudden, drastic drop in temperature, known as a cold spot, and the distinct, inexplicable scent of lavender or old perfume that has no physical source. But she is benign compared to what lurks in the shadows of the Thousand Doors. The most infamous entity of Lawang Sewu, and the one that is deeply rooted in Indonesian folklore, is the Kuntilanak. In Western terms, this entity shares similarities with the vampire or the vengeful spirit of a woman who died while pregnant or in childbirth. In the context of Lawang Sewu, the Kuntilanak is often believed to be the restless spirit of a victim of the wartime atrocities, women who were taken by the soldiers and met gruesome ends within the complex. The descriptions of the Kuntilanak at Lawang Sewu are visceral. Witnesses describe a woman with long, matted black hair covering her face, dressed in a soiled white gown. She is not seen walking. She is often seen perched on the high beams of the ceiling, or standing unnaturally still in the corners of the great halls. The sign of her presence is usually auditory before it is visual. It begins with the smell of jasmine flowers, a scent heavily associated with death and funerals in Japanese culture. Then comes the sound. It is not a scream, but a high-pitched, warbling laugh that seems to originate from everywhere and nowhere at once. There is a specific account from a night security guard in the early 2000s that chills the blood. He was doing his rounds on the second floor, checking the endless rows of doors to ensure they were locked. The building was empty. The electricity was sparse. As he walked down the long, open-air corridor, he heard the sound of a woman weeping. Thinking a tourist had been left behind or an intruder had entered, he followed the sound. As he approached the corner where the weeping was loudest, the sound abruptly stopped. He turned his flashlight beam toward the wall. There, standing with her back to him, was a woman in white. When he called out to her, she did not turn around. Instead, Her head rotated backward at an impossible angle, revealing a face that was not human pale. With hollow black eyes and a mouth that hung open too wide, the guard fled the premises and refused to work the night shift ever again. However, the most disturbing visual phenomena are linked directly to the executions of 1945. The headless spirits. These are not the wispy, transparent ghosts of Victorian fiction. Witnesses describe them as solid, shadow-like figures, dressed in tattered military uniforms or civilian rags. They are most frequently seen near the basement entrance and the main courtyard. The trauma of decapitation seems to have locked these entities into a perpetual loop of confusion and rage. One documented incident involves a group of high school students who broke into the facility on a dare before the major renovations took place. They were exploring the ground floor when they heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of boots marching on the tiled floor. The sound was distinct, the heavy tread of military boots. They hid behind one of the many pillars, expecting a security guard. Instead, they watched in paralyzed horror as a formation of 3 figures marched past them. The figures were dark and indistinct. But the students all reported the same terrifying detail. Where the heads should have been, there was nothing but a ragged, dark mist. The figures marched through a locked wooden door as if it were made of smoke, leaving behind a smell of metallic iron, the unmistakable scent of fresh blood. The reputation of Lawang Sewu is so potent that it became the subject of a highly controversial reality television incident that serves as a modern piece of documented evidence. In a popular Indonesian reality show called Dunia Lain, or Another World, a contestant was placed inside the crypt-like confines of Lawang Sewu's basement as a test of courage. He was left alone in the dark, with only a candle and a camera. This was not a scripted movie scene. This was a live recording. Millions of viewers watched as the contestant sat in the humid darkness of the squat prison area. For several minutes, there was silence. Then, the camera picked up a shadow forming in the corner of the cell. The contestant began to hyperventilate. The shadow grew denser, more defined, taking on the shape of a human figure. The contestant began screaming, pleading to be let out, his eyes fixed on something the camera could only partially see. Suddenly, the contestant's body seized. He went rigid, his eyes rolling back into his head, and he began to thrash violently. The production crew had to rush in and drag him out. It took hours to calm him down. He claimed that he had seen a woman with a crushed face reaching for him, trying to drag him into the water-filled pit. Following this broadcast, the government and the site managers became much stricter about who was allowed into the basement, and for a time, the area was completely sealed off to the public. The energy was deemed too volatile, too dangerous for casual tourism. Skeptics, of course, have tried to debunk the phenomena of Lawang Sewu. They point to the architecture itself as the culprit. The 1,000 doors create a wind tunnel effect. The endless corridors and cross-ventilation shafts can cause drafts that slam doors shut and create eerie whistling noises. They argue that the high humidity and mold in the basement can cause hallucinations or feelings of dread due to toxicity. They suggest that the orbs caught in photographs are merely dust particles reflecting flashlights, and the ghostly voices are simply the wind echoing through a building designed to amplify airflow. Furthermore, they argue that the power of suggestion is the true ghost. Everyone who enters Lawang Sewu knows its history. They know about the Japanese basement. They know about the executions. Therefore, their brains are primed to interpret every shadow as a soldier and every creak as a footstep. But these explanations fail to account for the sheer specificity of the encounters. Why do witnesses who have no prior knowledge of the Dutch woman all describe the same scent of lavender? Why do people who do not know about the specific method of execution report headless figures? Why do electronic voice phenomena, or EVP recordings, captured by paranormal investigators, consistently pick up voices speaking in archaic Dutch and Japanese, languages that the local Javanese investigators often do not speak? There is also the physical evidence of the site's history that reinforces the haunting. During renovations, workers have unearthed unmarked graves on the grounds. The soil around Lawang Sewu is literally packed with the remains of those who died violently. In spiritual terms, This creates a sour ground, a foundation that feeds negative energy. The building acts as a battery, storing the pain of thousands of souls. Let us return to the basement, for that is where the narrative of Lawang Sewu always leads. If you were to visit today, you would find it sanitized. The government of Semarang has invested heavily in turning Lawang Sewu into a heritage site. The walls are painted, the grounds are manicured. They host light shows and cultural festivals in the courtyard. They want to reclaim the building as a symbol of architectural beauty, erasing the stain of the haunted house. But the basement remains. Even with the lights on, the air down there is different. It is heavy. It presses against your chest. Visitors who descend into the squat prison area often report an overwhelming sensation of sadness that hits them like a physical wave. Some faint. Some burst into tears for no apparent reason. The guides will tell you about the history, about the water levels, about the overcrowding, but they will also watch you closely. Because they know that the things that live in the dark corners of that basement do not care about the renovations. They do not care about the new paint. There is a concept in paranormal research known as the stone tape theory. It suggests that minerals in the building materials, silica in the stone, iron in the concrete, can record emotional trauma. When the conditions are right, this recording plays back. Lawang Sewu is a massive structure of stone and iron. It witnessed 3 years of daily torture, starvation, and execution. If the stone tape theory is true, then Lawang Sewu is not just a building. It is a scream captured in masonry, playing on an eternal loop. Imagine standing in one of those squat cells in 1943. You are crouching in filth. It is pitch black. The only sound is the dripping of water and the muffled cries of the man in the cell next to you. You know that dawn brings interrogation. You know that eventually the footsteps will stop at your grate. Now, imagine that terror, that absolute peak of human fear, soaking into the walls around you. That energy does not simply evaporate when the war ends. It remains. It waits. This is the reality of Lawang Sewu. It is a collision of the colonial dream and the wartime nightmare. The 1,000 doors were built to let the air in, but they ended up trapping the souls of the dead. As you walk the corridors today, admiring the stained glass, stained with images of Dutch commerce and prosperity, you are walking through the same space where heads rolled across the floor. When you look out the window at the palm trees swaying in the breeze, you are looking through the same frame that a prisoner looked through before his execution. The past is not past here, it is present. The headless soldier still marches. The Dutch lady still glides. The Kuntilanak still laughs. Her jasmine-scented laugh from the rafters. The building may be a museum now, a bright spot on a tourist map. But when the sun goes down and the tourists leave, the 1,000 doors belong to them. We must ask ourselves, what makes a place haunted? Is it the ghosts themselves? Or is it our own inability to process the horrors that humans inflict upon one another? Perhaps the ghosts of Lawang Sewu are there to ensure we do not forget. They are the guardians of a history written in blood, refusing to be whitewashed by time. So, if you ever find yourself in Semarang, standing before the grand white arches of the 1,000 doors, listen closely. Listen past the traffic of the modern city. Listen past the chatter of the tourists. You might just hear the weeping of a woman who has lost her way, or the heavy tread of boots that have nowhere left to march. This has been a file from the Nocturnal Ledger. The doors of history are never truly closed. Some are just waiting for you to walk through them. Sleep well, if you can.